Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Taking the Pain Out of Performance Reviews. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with Biz Library, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer, so this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel. So this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it, and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line. You can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. We like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points, feel free to send those over through the question box that's located within the control panel. I like to weave the questions in as it relates to what we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. I am recording the webinar today, so I'll make a link to the webinar recording, as well as the slides and follow-up information on our blog after today's session. So that's bizlibrary.com/bizblog. I've also put a link to the slides in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You should be able to click on that link and download the slides. I also sent out a link to the slides in the reminder email that you should have received this morning. For all of you HR professionals attending, today's webinar is approved for 1 hour CE credit for general credit for recertification. So I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar. I'll also send out a follow-up email to all of today's attendees that includes a link to the completion certificate. The most important thing is the program ID number or the activity ID number. That's what you'll need to record with HRCI. If you'd like more information on certification or recertification, I encourage you to visit hrci.org. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with Biz Library. I graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in journalism. I've been working in the training and development industry now for about 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so I tweet on behalf of Biz Library at Biz Library and also at my own account at Jess L. Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles and discussions around training and development, human resources, and marketing. So if you're on either of those social networks, I'd love it if you'd reach out and connect. Presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for Biz Library. Chris has also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm where he helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. He's been performing learning, development, and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. Chris graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. Chris is also active in social media, so you can find him on Twitter at Chris Osborne STL, and he's also on LinkedIn, so I'm sure he'd love it if you reach out and connect as well. Just to give you a little bit of background on Biz Library is a leading provider of online employee training and e-learning solutions. The award-winning content library contains more than 7,000 online employee training videos covering every business training topic. So that includes communication skills, leadership and management, sales and customer service, compliance training, safety training, desktop computer skills, and more. Additionally, Biz Library's LMS, or Learning Management System, and social learning technology platform help HR and training leaders improve and manage employee learning. All right, so enough about us. I have a quick poll question to learn a little bit more about the attendees with us today. So you should see the poll pop up on your screen in just a moment. So what would you say is your biggest pain with performance reviews? Is it A, infrequent, B, generic, C, not every goal is considered, D, not agile, or E, bad for engagement?
And we don't have an all of the above. You just have to pick your biggest pain point. Hey, Jessica.
Hey, how are you?
I am well.
Good.
Yes, we timed this well today, so we'll be done before the Cardinal game starts. So that's good.
You know, I was going to ask about that. I was like, how? So Chris is in St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis, so most people know that St. Louis is a pretty big baseball town, and it tends to be slightly disruptive to workplaces.
This time of year,
Right.
yes.
I live in Chicago now, but I'm still a Cardinals fan. Otherwise, I'd be probably be disowned by most of my family. But
Yes, you would be. And many of your friends, too, I might add.
yes, so fine line.
Yes.
All right, cool. We have decent participation, so I'll go ahead and close out the poll and share the results with everyone. So it looks like of the attendees today, 38% said that the biggest pain is that performance reviews are generic. 33% said infrequent. 14% said not agile. 10% said not every goal is considered, and 5% bad for engagement.
Yeah, obviously, with all of these issues, it kind of goes without saying that they're bad for engagement. But it's a great starter for today's session because we didn't just make these up. This is some information reported at a TLNT, which we'll give you the link to in a minute, blog post about the 5 biggest problems with performance reviews. And I just would be curious, sort of an informal poll, just sort of what's been personally, not just from an organization, personally, what was the worst aspect of a performance review in your professional past? I'll share mine when we get a little further into today's session, but I don't think many of us have a lot of great experiences with them, so it's just a great topic to talk about, and a great topic, I think, to begin to illustrate how we can actually link the performance review process to actually improving performance. So anyway, that's kind of the hope today.
Cool. So I'll go ahead and close out the poll. And again, there's 3 high-level things that we're going to cover in today's session. So Chris, I'll pass the ball over to you, let you briefly go through those for us, and then we'll keep going.
All right. Well, let's hope that I get this right. And you should see, with a little bit of luck,
Yeah, we're good to go.
you do see.
Yep.
Good deal. All right. Once in a while, huh? I'm working with 2 monitors for the first time in quite a while, so I'm kind of excited about that. So we have 3 things we want to cover today. We want to talk about, just broadly, the strategic role of performance management. I know that this seems kind of, especially for participants in this kind of a webinar, that ought to be kind of one of those, well, geez, that seems pretty obvious. But unfortunately, for a lot of organizations, it's not. And we really want to make sure that we kind of lay out a framework for the rest of today's conversation. Then we want to talk about why we actually do performance reviews, and I have my own opinions about that, but we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to link all that prior information to, I think, a really important takeaway. Why continuous learning and development is important, and more importantly, how to create and how to work with your employees on a review methodology or a review process that actually fosters an environment where people are in a continuous learning and development mode. I think that's really important and extremely critical that we get our hands wrapped around that. All right, so this is some data. Jessica and I we read and research a lot, and this topic in particular was a ton of fun to get out and research because there's so much information and data out there about this. And I love these data points. Jessica, great job on this infographic, by the way, but just look at that first one. 45% of HR leaders think annual performance reviews are not an accurate appraisal of employees' work, and that's according to a 2012 SHRM Global Force sponsored survey. So 45% of HR leaders say they're not accurate. At least 30% of performance reviews ended up in decreased employee performance. Now let that soak in for a second. So this is a process where we're supposed to be helping our employees continuously improve and grow and help our organization move forward. But this annual performance review, a third of the time, works to decrease employee performance. That's pretty astounding. And I love this one. 45% of employees think clear, honest communication from managers would improve the quality of engagement. And think about those 5 high-level issues that we talked about in the poll. none of those supported clear, honest communication. Each of those, if you think about each one of those problem areas, they all related to performance reviews doing none of these things. Infrequent, generic, not every goal is considered, not agile. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. So we seem to be working across purposes a lot of times here. A humorist, Guy Browning, he's really funny. I love this quote. Appraisals are where you get together with your team leader and agree what an outstanding member of the team you are, how much your contribution has been valued, what massive potential you have, and in recognition of all this, would you mind having your salary halved? So too often they feel like that. I mean, that's kind of an extreme quote, which is sort of the point of the humor, but how many times have we felt like this? We found a wonderful book written by Jeffrey and Linda Russell titled Fearless Performance Reviews, Coaching Conversations that Turn Every Employee into a Star Player. And part of the reason I love this book so much is it lays out in a very methodical way the issues that we have as organizations, and I think as learning professionals too, we could agree, with the annual performance review. And they provide some wonderful advice and a methodology for getting ahead of improved performance as opposed to always being behind it, which is one of the big issues with performance reviews. So we borrowed, there's a great book out there called The Terrible Twos of Training, so we kind of blended those things together. So these are the terrible twos of performance reviews. Too much at stake, too judgmental, too often you have to deal with uncomfortable truths, too much fixing blame, how many of us have seen that happen, too few managers are skilled at them, too much uncertainty, too little control. I mean, you hate to go into a situation where you have virtually no control of what's going to happen, and too many one-way conversations. Really pretty telling. I mentioned earlier that I was going to share my personal worst experience with the performance review, and it really had to do with numbers 3 and 4, too much fixing blame and too few managers who are skilled at them. Jessica mentioned I'm a recovering attorney, and it happened, this review I keep going back to when I think about terrible experiences, happened when I was practicing law. And there wasn't anything discussed about the 2.5 years of amazing success and great results I'd had, bringing tons and tons of business to the law firm. It was all about one specific case that the senior partner on the case had botched up. But the blame, of course, blame flows downhill, right? I get blamed. And it was just a massively bizarre, surrealistic conversation. And the two attorneys that delivered the review were horrible at explaining the framework, at explaining the kind. It was just a miserable experience. So I'm sure many of you have had similar kind of things happen. Jessica, what's the worst single performance review experience you've ever had?
I would just say that it's when it's irrelevant. So it's like looking at both sides that are playing some sort of like kind of generic statements of behavior or achievements when it really doesn't mean that much at that time. So it's like you waited a whole year to look at how you can improve performance. By the end of the year, it's like the year you've already wasted all that time when you could have been improving along the way. So I think that, it's become, sometimes it's just kind of like this formalized thing that it doesn't really mean anything. Most of the time you're just regurgitating statements that you're looking at from like a list of things that you should include on your performance review.
Right. I couldn't agree more. So again, these are those 5 issues that we mentioned earlier. These are common problems that employees cite over and over and over in survey after survey after survey about problems with performance reviews. They're infrequent. They're generic. Stop and think about even the tools, the web-based tools that we have that help us with performance reviews, where they have that canned language that you can just grab and drop in there. Trust me, employees understand where that's coming from. And just like Jessica said, it doesn't help. It turns the conversation into something that's completely meaningless. Not every goal is considered. Boy, we've seen that happen over and over, where you were assigned certain goals over the course of the year. You hit them, and then you don't talk about those successes, but you talk about the one strategic goal where instead of hitting at 100%, you hit 95%. And then you're beat up over the 5%, but you don't talk about all the other side projects, all the other things that happened over the course of the year that did advance the organization in some way. They're not agile, and as Jessica said, this is a big issue with annual reviews. You've wasted a year. You've wasted a year of opportunities to really engage with your employees to help them understand how to perform better. And then they're really bad for engagement. And for all the reasons, there's a lot of data that confirms that. So why do we even do them? Why do we need them? And one of the things that struck me, Jessica, again, I'm going to go back to my past just very briefly, mentioned I used to practice law and then ended up leaving the practice law to become a VP of HR. And I swear, these are really what happened. We document performance problems. Okay, so is that really helping us improve performance there? And then typically the documentation is terrible. We're supposed to do it to recognize high performers, but if they're not a fair assessment, number 45% of HR professionals, if they lead to disengage, it doesn't work to do that. We don't really identify developmental needs, particularly if reviews are somehow or another linked to compensation, and that is whole other issue. But ultimately, I really do believe, when I talk to HR people and HR professionals out there, I think the last reason is why so many organizations do it. It's just inertia. We do it because we're supposed to. We're supposed to have an annual review, but nobody stops to think about how to do them well and what the strategic purpose of performance evaluation should be. And ultimately, that itself is the critical failure. I love this quote. This is going to tee up the rest of today's conversation because this really is a fabulous way to begin to think about this. The best kind of performance review is no performance review. A lot of people won't tell you this, but they don't need to document your good performance, just your poor one. That way they have written documentation that will help them get rid of you without fear of retribution. And as a former attorney, I'll tell you that performance reviews created that way are never good evidence. So the best kind of performance review is no performance review. So let that soak in for just a second as we begin to explore why I believe that that's true. This is a great quote from Ray B. Williams from an article titled Wired for Success that was reproduced in Psychology Today. Clearly, the annual performance review was designed for a work environment where control of individual employee performance was a key function. In today's team and collaborative environment, that perspective no longer makes sense. And if you think about the ways in which we work today, how we do things, the speed with which we work, the collaborative nature of many workplaces, the rise of millennials in the workplace, just all the different things that are happening, this is absolutely a spot-on comment. Performance reviews were designed for a work environment that doesn't have any relationship at all to the work environment for most employees today. So we need to think about something different. So let's step back. Strategically, just from a strategic perspective, ideally, what are we attempting to do with our employees? In an ideal world, what we're attempting to do is help employees move from their current state of performance to a desired state of performance, something better. We want them to grow. We want to see their capacity for improvement and growth improve as we work with them and nurture them and coach them and teach them new skills and watch their skills develop. That's the idea behind true strategic performance management. The idea, the purpose, the strategic purpose is to improve performance. So this requires a change in our mindset from this annual kind of, Jessica didn't use this word, but it would kind of describe what she was talking about, kind of a gotcha kind of review, which is what I experienced and described, to a mindset that is collaborative and coaching driven so that our managers are far more engaged on a daily basis with the actual performance of our employees. We aren't waiting until January to do an annual review or whenever you do it. We are working with them all the time. It's a different mindset. It's a different mindset. And then we want to learn and teach 5 best practices that we have identified from studying this very carefully that lead to performance management actually improving performance. And ultimately, again, like I said, that should be our goal. This, again, comes from that book written by Jeffrey Russell, Linda Russell. I love this continuum that they lay out here. And in every situation, every relationship, use a position on this mindset continuum. So you've got from, on the far left, sort of a my way mindset. And sometimes you have to do that. You're wrong, your behavior in the situation is wrong, or we got to do this. To a collaborative mindset, meaning that the manager comes into the relationship open to learning things, understanding that employees are in fact doing their best, that you as a manager only know part of the story, and that everybody can win. That's a big shift for a lot of very traditional management approaches, but it really works. I think the part of this that, as me as a manager, that I had the hardest time grasping and really embracing was sort of the idea that people are doing their best. I'm attorney by background, attorney by trade. When you work in HR, you just see so many crazy things happening in the workplace. It can kind of leave you jaded and a little cynical. And it just took me a long time to shed that approach. And once I really accepted that, look, these employees want to perform. Employees want to do well. They don't want to fail. They want to do well. When I really embraced that, the rest of this became so much easier, and I've become, I think, a much, much better day-to-day manager by moving my mindset from the left-hand side further to the right-hand side. Now, I'm certainly not perfect. I don't do it right every time. Good grief. I wish I did. But if I stay focused on those elements, helping both people win, that I only know part of what's going on, that I have something to learn. My employees can teach me things. It really does change the whole dynamic of the relationship. So here's sort of the way to begin to recognize when you've got managers that really are adapting that collaborative coaching mindset. And this is where you want to move your managers. This is our coaching job with our frontline managers and supervisors. We want to get them here, okay? So think of the relationship, if you're really engaged with your employees on a day-to-day basis, as an opportunity for continuous learning together. You're both going to explore new things, new ideas, new ways of looking at older problems, identifying what skills are really going to be important to move this part of the organization forward. So it's a continuous exploration and learning process where the role of teacher and student sometimes flips, and it's not clear where the line is between teacher and student. That's not a bad thing. And then if you stay focused on the idea that this is really about improvement, this is not, I'm not saying that there aren't times, and there certainly are times, when you have to do corrective coaching. Okay, something happened and you have to, address it. But that's not the strategic purpose of performance management. It must be about improvement. That's really the goal. That's really where we're trying to get to. So you have mutual conversations about discovery and then help the employee improve and learn. And we know that that's the same as the first 2 points, but it really and truly is that important. That's really the mindset we are looking for. Jessica, anything to add to this? Because I know you are wired to collaborate. You're just sort of in your genetic predisposition. So I know this is probably easier for you than a lot of people, but do you have anything to add?
Well, one thing that I would add is that maybe you could look at the performance review as something a little bit different. Many times today, our employees work in teams, so most of the key performance indicators that you're looking at, or the KPIs, are direct reflection of the work and the performance of the team. So not saying that like an end of the year reflection or review is bad, but maybe you frame it in the way of a team, and you're looking at individual performance, on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, and then maybe you do a reflection as a team. But that way you're not put on the defensive, so not any one person feels like they're being attacked or they're being criticized. It's more of a team reflection. So, hey, we contributed in this way. So that can kind of help to bring in that collaborative mindset. But that's what I would add. We actually had a question a little bit earlier, so sorry I didn't jump in in when it came, Chris, but this is in regards to performance reviews being agile. So could you, and it relates to what we're saying here, but could you explain a little bit what you mean by that?
Yes, I would be delighted to. And let me move to the keys to effective performance management. These are the 5 best practices as I explain what I mean by not agile, and keep that in mind as you look at these 5 best practices. Okay? So go back to what Jessica just said. Jessica, by the way, it's a great comment. Really appreciate that. So think about what Jessica framed for us there, that, you know, we work so much in teams and so many objectives. Think about key performance indicators for your organization. You have HR goals as a team. What are we supposed to accomplish as a team? Here at Biz Library, we have marketing goals that we work on together, collaboratively as a team. So for the performance management, I'm going to use the marketing as an example because I live and breathe this every day, and so does Jessica. But I'm going to use us as an example. What we mean by agile is if we set our goals and put them aside and didn't talk about them and didn't work with them as a clear sort of guiding beacon every day, every week about what we're trying to do, and we wait till the end of the year and we look back and we go, oh, wow, we were 15% below where we should have been in terms of leads or lead value, whatever the metric is, as a team, we've given up the opportunity to correct performance and do course corrections and, you know, think about different ways to do things, different ways to approach things, so that we could have stayed on target and hit our goals. That's what we mean by agile. So an annual performance review flies in the face of agility. Agility is about setting clear goals and then keeping them front and center and very transparent. So everybody in the team can look quickly and see, okay, so here's where we were last week, and here's where we needed to be. So are we trending up? Are we trending down? Where are we? And everybody has to have key job responsibilities so people know what their role is in contributing to hitting those goals. And then we identify and use only the critical competencies necessary to support the behaviors job by job. And then we coach. As a manager, my job is to get involved with my team and coach on a day-to-day basis. I don't have to do the email campaigns or set up the HTML templates or revise the website or edit and revise every wonderful webinar slideshow that we do. My job is to provide coaching on a day-to-day business and continuous feedback so Jessica knows that, hey, great job, we're on track, we're delivering content at the right rate, at the right pace, to let our email marketing people know, hey, that template looked really good, how is the open and click rate, what's going on, where can we find places for improvement, and to make it, as Jessica said, not sort of putting the employees on the defensive, but to make it about a collaborative effort to improve continuously. And then, of course, that requires you to be honest and objective. Sometimes you have to face unpleasant realities, which I will be real frank, we had to do last year with our marketing effort after the first marketing quarter of the year. We were behind. So we had a meeting and said, okay, so here's where we are. Here's where we'd like to be. How do we go from point A to point B? And that required an honest and objective conversation by everybody. And you can't get that from your employees without these other pieces being here first. They need to have clear goals, understand what they have to do, they have to trust you, we have to use the right. So it all feeds. You can't do one without the other. And it really is important to embrace these 5 best practices. And they work. These really, really work. They're again, this isn't magic, this isn't complex, but it takes time, effort, and the effort has to be consistent and relentless. Jessica, I see the question still flashing a little bit. Is there a question we should take now, or should I go on?
Yeah, so we got a question in from Brian. So he asked, what if the strategic plan or the op plan is bad? Can that affect performance? Or what do you do in the case where the plan that was set out from the leaders in your organization really wasn't that great to begin with?
Boy, I wish I could say that never happened or happens, but it does, doesn't it? Well, you got a couple of options, and none of these are particularly comfortable, Brad. I'm just going to be real up front because it's a great question. But the first option is to go to senior management and say, okay, so we've gotten these objectives, these goals, and they're not wise. They're not rooted in reality, and it's not realistic to expect us to do this. We can't do it. It's not physically or possible within our current systems, with our current, and we just have to be honest. Again, this whole idea about honest and objective. The other option, and again, this is more of a long-term fix, is to provide suggestions. Well, what if we adjusted the goal here? Because for the past 90 days, we've been working this way, and it's obvious we're not going to hit that goal, but we are here, and this is still an improvement over prior performance. I'd like to modify the goal to a realistic number and eventually find a way to be able to participate in the goal setting in your organization, even if it's a team level, just to say, here's where we've been, here's where we think we can go with this level of improvement. There aren't great options for that. We have a webinar which includes some content about how to set organizational goals, and I wish every organization did a better job with it, but there aren't great options there. But again, this gets down to having to be honest and objective with your team and being fair with their performance so that they understand that their performance may or may not be impacted, hopefully not impacted, by somebody setting an unwise or unattainable goal, which gets to this next point, it's to setting goals. Does the goal you're setting promote the goals you've set for the organization as a whole? And does it promote the goals you've set for the team as a whole? Are the goals difficult yet attainable for the organization, for the team, for the employee, and can we measure it? Now, the reason that goal setting is so unbelievably important is we want to encourage smart, effective decision-making over the course of the year. And when you set goals with this sort of measurement in mind, does it promote the goals of the organization? Is it difficult yet attainable? Can we measure it? When we set goals that can be characterized this way, we create a decision-making framework where people can measure their behavior, measure what they're doing, and say, yes, if we do that, we promote that goal. On the other hand, if we set unattainable goals really, really way out there, we encourage very risky behavior because employees have to take risks, and sometimes unnecessary, unreasonable risks, to hit these growth goals or the goals that are set out there. We create a framework for a whole range of really, really bad decisions. And if you want to see how that manifests itself across an entire industry, go study what happened to the banking and finance industry prior to the meltdown. It had a lot to do with setting unreasonable year-over-year growth, financial growth goals. It created a framework for some really, really bad decisions. Okay? So anyway, that's why that becomes so important. So how do we make sure that we're doing, this is just an example. So let's just say that as an organization, we want to become a market leader. We want to move from where we are to become a recognized market leader in our organization. So our customer service team, they're going to contribute to this by helping us retain customers. And we're going to work on dealing with customer complaints efficiently. And now we may have let's assume we have a really good way to measure it, time, length of time, customer satisfaction surveys, whatever it is. But that's what we want to do. And then the customer service representative goal should be part of the company's effort to become a marketing leader by dealing with each customer complaint that they deal with on an efficient, effective basis. And now we've got something to work with here, and we can look at the behaviors that are necessary to accomplish that goal. We can look at the competencies that will help support the kind of behaviors we're looking at. And now we have performance improvement that we can coach to on an everyday basis. That's how to do that. Okay. All right. So the next piece, which ties right into what I was just saying, is we have to determine key responsibilities. If you look at most job descriptions, and I've certainly seen them, and I have to confess, embarrassingly, that I've written them this way before too, we put a huge number of critical functions, critical responsibilities, and then there's a bunch of extra stuff, and sometimes it's a laundry list of 12, 15, 20, 25, whatever it is, some crazy list of items. And it's impossible to find an employee at any level of mastery to do all of those things really, really well. So you have to step back and really think carefully about two questions there that I think are really a great way to begin to think about the key responsibilities necessary for success in this role. What does successful performance look like, and how will we know it? In other words, how can we measure it? Going back to goal setting, right? We want to measure it. So if our customer service rep, if the successful customer service rep looks like Bill or Teresa, how will we know that they're succeeding at the same level? Through surveys, through time on phone, through number of cases dealt with, whatever the metrics are. And then you want to design a job, design responsibilities that really play to employees' strengths. That should be a given. And when you're starting to think through carefully about performance management, performance coaching, performance improvement, you're going to get a lot bigger bang for the buck working, coaching, and teaching to places where your employees are strong, as opposed to trying to plug weaknesses. I'll use myself as an example. I really am not very good at dealing with financial documents. I mean, I understand balance sheets and spreadsheets and all that sort of stuff, but I could study these things for months and months and months and just reach a little bit of improvement, because it's just not something I'm neither motivated to do nor am I particularly good at. On the other hand, maybe building to presentation strengths or writing or whatever, something I feel like I do reasonably well, with the same amount of effort, I can have a lot bigger gain in effective performance. So play to your employees' strengths. Managers have unique, this is a great quote. This is a quote we pulled from a Gallup study called 2013, The State of the American Workplace. Gallup releases this study every year. If you don't get it, it's incredible. Great information in here. Managers have unique opportunities in their daily interactions with employees to empower them to discover and develop their strengths. And they have the ability to position employees in roles where they can do what they do best every day. Employees who feel engaged at work and are able to use their strengths in their jobs more productive and more profitable and have higher quality work. The data, this is a data-driven study, proves really, it just makes a powerful case for playing to employee strengths. It works, and that's really what we should be constantly looking at, which gets us to this next piece, identify and use competencies. Now, there are three levels of competencies that most organizations deal with. There's core competencies that have to do with your industry and sort of your organizational culture. So if you're in telecommunications, there's a certain amount of information, certain amount of knowledge, a certain amount of ability related specifically to that industry you expect every employee to have. Then there are job family competencies. And think of this as sort of your business discipline, accounting, human resources, training and development, operations, logistics. There are job family competencies that each individual functioning in that area needs to master at a specific level of mastery to enable them to be successful for their job. And then there's the job role competencies, which where we dive into that very last point. What's the appropriate level of mastery required to do this job well? So if you got a VP of HR, your VP of HR probably needs to know something about benefits, employee relations, recruiting, retention, but at what level of mastery must they function at compared to the HR professional that's tasked with benefits administration, payroll, or recruiting? See what I mean? So the level of mastery required for success will be different job role to job role. Jessica, did I explain that well?
Yeah, I think you explained it well, Chris. And then, if you're looking at, creating some sort of a way to measure, where the employee is, you could consider, so maybe you have each of the competencies as a higher level. You could develop maybe 3 to 4 supporting behaviors, and you could do a 360-degree review. So basically, it's assign a basic Likert scale to each of the behavior statements, and then have the manager, the employee, and someone that they work with rate them on it. So that's one way that you can get to measuring the level of competency that the employee is at.
Yeah, Jessica probably didn't know that she was being as wise as she was there, but that was really great. But think of what Jessica said there at the beginning of that, 3 or 4 competencies, or 3 or 4 behaviors. And that is exactly the number to focus on, 3 or 4. We can improve focusing on 3 or 4 areas of improvement at a time. We move beyond that, and we just can't, it just doesn't work. Research is pretty clear on this. But if we stay focused on just those job roles, just those behaviors that really drive success in that role at the right level, Jessica's spot on. Those 360-degree views can be incredibly illuminating, but we're focused on just the areas that the employee needs help in. And you're going to see, I think, a big improvement in the results that you're getting from your performance improvement and performance management efforts. All right, the next best practice is the idea of a continuous coaching and feedback loop, creating a culture, relationships between employees and managers where this becomes not the exception. This is the norm. This is the day-to-day way people operate. So I'm not talking about training per se. Now, training may be necessary. You may have to do training to get back to that prior slide, to reach that required level of mastery. But coaching and feedback is something different. Coaching is a relationship, a close working relationship between your managers and your employees. These skills are really, really critical, really critical. And I don't know that we spend enough time teaching our frontline managers and supervisors coaching skills. But if you think back to those 5 things that we found wrong with performance reviews, and think about creating an environment, a working environment, where the norm is coaching and continuous feedback, collaborative, built towards improvement. Now think about those 5 problems. Infrequent, that goes away because the engagement with the employee is on an everyday. Generic, well, it can be generic. If you've got a relationship with your employee where you understand what they do well, what motivates them, what they need. Not every goal is considered is the third of the problems. And think about, again, creating this consistent coaching feedback and loop where everything over the course of the year is being worked on collaboratively, and you're trying to move performance from one level to another. Every goal is being worked on. Agile, this is the definition of agility. It's something that we can move and change and adjust and keep things moving so we're in alignment and we're going where we need to go towards achieving our goals. It eliminates that issue as well. And then the last of the 5, bad for engagement. Going back to that Gallup survey, managers have a unique opportunity to put employees in positions to work to their strengths. Managers are uniquely positioned in our organization to drive the success of their employees. And this is one of the most critical ways to do it. So this relationship is about advice and counsel. It's about providing support. Hey, what can I do to help you? What do you need from me to make your job easier this week? It's about guidance and boosting, not deleting or diminishing, but boosting confidence. Going back to what we said earlier about setting appropriate goals so people have a framework for making good decisions, all of this ties into, this becomes kind of the connective tissue around all of this is great coaching and feedback. Jessica, I know you and I work remotely, but we, I think, do a reasonably good job with this, kind of sometimes mutual coaching. But does this resonate with you? Does this feel honest?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it resonates well, and it's usually makes for a better relationship when it's open feedback back and forth. So then it's not always one way. And you also have an understanding of what kind of coaching and feedback are people most receptive to. So the coaching and feedback that I appreciate and that helps me stay motivated and helps me improve my performance may be a lot different than someone else that I work with. So you have to take the time to understand that as well. So again, it's really about building that relationship with the employee. And I know it can be hard, and it sounds really nice and flowery to say that in a webinar, but in the long run, it's going to make the improvement of your employees better overall. So it's something that you can't just dismiss.
I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't have said it any better than that. The issue is, has nothing to do with, getting into some sort of a rote way to make things happen. Jessica, I'm getting an error message on my computer here, so I'm going to try to advance this slide and make sure it works. If not, you may need to take the ball back here, so just hang on here for just a second.
Sure.
Okay, did it advance on the screen?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, well, good. It says Internet Explorer stopped working, but obviously something's still working. All right, I love this quote. I haven't got the slightest idea of how to change people, but I keep a long list of prospective candidates just in case I should ever figure it out. From David Sedaris, an American humorist and author. Yeah, it really isn't the right approach to performance management, but we don't need to keep a long list. We need to keep right in front of us the people that need help, which ties back into our best practices, which is an objective appraisal of performance. Now, when I say objective, I don't mean that you've got you count this many phone calls or this many of this or this many widgets or this much productivity. Objective equals fair. That is the key to keep in mind. And step back and think for just a second strategically about what it is we ask our managers to do every single day. We are asking them to make smart decisions, frequently in time crunch situations without every piece of information that the manager might ideally like in order to make the call. But we expected managers to exercise sound professional judgment in the performance of their job. Well, we need to expect the same thing in the objective appraisal of the performance of their employees so that the coaching happens on a timely basis. It doesn't have to be always fact-based. Observation, when it's professional and based upon things that you can measure and explain, is perfectly okay. Timely notes and records make a big difference. It is perfectly fine to use observations. Observations can be objective, as again, the measurement there is fair. Is this fair? And we do expect our managers to be able to exercise sound professional judgment to make this work. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be mysterious, but we do have to kind of give up the notion that we're going to have a pinned down, finite, numeric measurement for every type of performance. Think about today's knowledge workers. Think about the contributions that knowledge workers make every day. A lot of those contributions are impossible to put strict metrics around, but we do observe their behavior. We do observe their performance. We do understand when they're doing well. We can be objective, and therefore we can be fair. Okay, so that's the idea. Jessica, I'm getting all kinds of error messages here, so just speak up if something happens, okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so the idea of continuous learning and development, this is what we're aiming for. This should be our goal. So these are the types of relationships we want all of our managers and employees to enjoy. This is really critical. So this is a really great skill development plan. Jessica, you put this together, and I really love the way you laid this out. Would you mind walking us through this slide, please?
Sure, Chris, and this is obviously a super simple one, and we're just focusing on one skill or ability, but really you want to create a plan that's achievable. So consider just selecting a few key skills that an employee will work on and work to master that year. So, for example, you outline the skill or capability. So what we want to focus on for this manager is leading meetings. These are some of the development options. So understanding what the learning preferences are of the employee, their learning styles, what's going to make an impact on this specific skill or capability. So likely leading meetings is going to be a mix of things. So you're actually going to have to do it, but then you want somebody to set that foundational. So we have a video here. So this video demonstrates the behaviors, and then you can go into a meeting and lead that meeting and demonstrate those behaviors. You have an action related to that. So you gather with your team to discuss meeting management. You create different expectations that's expected and should be applied across the team and across different meetings. And you're going to review your progress monthly. So maybe it's redundant to do it on a weekly basis, but you're going to review your progress on a monthly basis. So that's just an example. Again, it's pretty simple, but that's the idea, is to keep it simple so you're not overloading them with things that they have to work on so they never feel like they've ever really achieved anything.
Yeah, great point. The thing I love about this example, by the way, Jessica, really well selected here. Think about who's leading meetings. You got managers and supervisors, and who needs to take actionable information out of meetings? Their employees, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. Sometimes it's the manager as well, but hopefully it is. But meetings, by definition, well-run meetings, tend to be collaborative. I mean, there may be times when you just have to simply tell something or explain something. But when you're leading a meeting, you want to make sure that everybody walks out of there not confused about what the meeting was about and not confused about the next steps. So this is one of these deals, going back to what we talked about with knowledge workers. How would you measure that numerically? It'd be pretty hard to do, wouldn't it? But we can understand success, and we can understand objectively whether progress is being made with the monthly review. How many meetings, Chris, how many meetings did you run this month? Well, I ran 6. Okay. What'd your team say about the meetings? This is one of these situations where group feedback, everybody collaborating to make the meetings work better and facilitate more easily for the manager. This is a great illustration. So I love this example for a whole range of reasons, but Jessica's right. Just keep it simple, keep it easy to understand, keep it direct, and you're setting yourself up for success rather than frustration with your performance management, performance review processes. Okay, so just a quick recap, the 5 keys to effective performance management. Set clear goals. And again, going back to the question Brad asked, hopefully the goals aren't bad, that you can get to them, they're realistic, they're reasonable, but set clear goals. Make wise choices about the goals. Then we determine key job responsibilities from departments, from teams, down to employees. What are the key job responsibilities that we have to perform effectively to hit those goals? What are the behaviors that we have to engage in, maybe at a different level of mastery, but these are the things we have to do every day in order to hit our goal. Now we identify and use the competencies that support the application of those behaviors, okay? And then as a manager, our role is to coach on a daily basis and provide continuous feedback, lots of opportunities for improvement, really be engaged with it, and then all of the participants, all the stakeholders, have to accept the responsibility to be honest and objective throughout the process. I mean, if you'll get those 5 pieces in place, you're setting yourself up for a really successful and well-organized performance management program that isn't dependent upon an annual review to deliver the goods. All right, Jessica, I'm going to mute myself and get a drink and turn this over to you for a few minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good, Chris. We've gotten a lot of really great questions in, so you can keep them, adding them over through the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. First, I have a few recommended resources for today's attendees. These first 2, the first one is called Handling Tricky Appraisals. So it's help you frame the appraisal in a way that's constructive rather than destructive. One of my favorite kind of series, it's called Cutting Edge Communication. It puts if you've ever seen the TV show The Office, you get to know, it's really character driven, so you get to know the characters that are in these different scenarios, and it uses humor to get the point across. So those are some of my favorites. Not for everyone, but those are it's one of my favorites. This next one is on giving feedback. Emotional intelligence is huge in organizations right now, especially as we move. Most of what we do is in a digital environment, so understanding how emotional intelligence interact and how that affects the feedback that we give and receive is also really important. So I recommend that course. That one is relevant to all employees. It's a little bit longer in length than some of the other ones, but it's a good one nonetheless. These other 2 are related to setting goals. This next one is from the Cutting Edge series again, but using goals to grow. So that one's a shorter video, 10 minutes in length. And then the next one is Developing Others, Connect Every Employee Individual Goals to the organization's vision and strategy. The second one that I recommend has some action plans and action worksheets that you can work with an employee to fill out and then develop towards. So all those are recommended resources. You can try out any of the resources that I highlighted today. They're all included in the Biz Library collection. So you can try those out as well as the 7,000 other courses if you'd like to do a free 30-day trial. So we got a lot of great questions. I'll just leave the poll up. If you want to try out the courses with a 30-day trial, just let me know through the poll. All right, so Chris, first question. We have 2 questions that are both related to goals. So this one from Lori is, what is the purpose of the goals being difficult?
You mean like me getting names right when I refer to people as ask questions? Thanks for catching that, by the way. The purpose of making the goals difficult yet attainable has to do with the way human beings are motivated, the way we find value in things, and the way we are sort of innately wired to succeed. There's a great book out there called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, written by Daniel Pink, and he talks about this very, very, very concept. And there's a couple of studies out there floating around that Daniel Pink cites that talk about the difference in development when a goal is so easy, too easy to achieve. We get bored. We don't strive. I know it seems kind of strange, but it's a little bit counterintuitive. Well, it's so easy to do. Why wouldn't people just do it? It doesn't work that way. The studies are kind of interesting in this. People actually thrive when they're given a challenge that's doable, but difficult to attain. People really will stretch themselves to get there. And this is where good involvement with your coaches, with your managers, coaching rather to your managers and supervisors can make a big difference. So again, you don't want it to be so impossible to get to, but you don't want it to be easy either. So there's a balance in there between those two extremes, but the ideal goal is one that's attainable but difficult to move towards. And I think you'll find, particularly if you'll examine that research cited by Daniel Pink, I think you'll find that it works pretty well.
All right, this next question is from Brian related to goals. How would I test my measurement of goals to determine if they're appropriate in measuring performance of the staff?
Brian, great question. There's an old-fashioned acronym, SMART. Is it specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound? That's a good way to examine whether you've got a goal you can manage to or not. Okay, that's what SMART goals do. The next step in front of that, the preliminary step, is to determine whether the goals, to use your word, are appropriate for your employee and team. And if you'll go back to that diagram we had earlier with the customer service, we wanted to be a market leader, so the customer service team has this goal, and so the customer service reps need to do these things better. That's really how to do it, is to identify, am I promoting a goal that will encourage the kind of behaviors that I need to see to bridge the gap between our current level of performance and our desired level of performance. If the answer to that is yes, you got it, and that's really how to do it.
All right, this next question is from Laura related to holding managers accountable. So she asks, how can you hold managers accountable for their role in performance management, ensuring they're providing constant coaching and feedback and having frequent performance discussions with their employees?
God, did everybody just go find the hardest questions they could ask?
Oh, good questions.
They're great questions, and they really get right to the heart of some of the most nagging challenges in this area. Manager accountability, that is a great challenge that many organizations never overcome effectively, which is one of the reasons only 20% of organizations ever hit their strategic goals in the first place, according to Harvard Business Review. Or it's one of the reasons, one of the contributing factors. So how do you do it? How would you think that would make sense? You start with making the expectations clear. Again, going back to setting clear goals, clearly lay out for each of your managers and supervisors what's expected of them in terms of developing their employees. We expect you, this is part of your job, this is a critical thing we need you to do. We expect you to improve the overall capability and capacity of your team. And here's where it is today, and here's where we want it to be. Your job, Mr. Manager or Ms. Manager, is to make that happen. So their manager then has to talk to that manager about it on a regular basis, provide coaching and feedback on how to do it, and that's really how you build a sense of accountability for making that happen.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. We do have another one, but maybe we'll answer that one through the video blog. So this next one's from Barbara. So it's related to agility in a structured industry. So do you have any helpful hints that could help us keep things agile when most of the positions within an auto dealership are pretty structured in nature?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And so step back and think about it for just a second. Think about how much has changed in the automobile industry and the behaviors of buyers over the past 3 to 5 years. A lot's changed. And do we think the pace of change is going to slow down or accelerate? Well, pace of change is probably going to accelerate. So don't think about the job role necessarily being agile. Think about the performance improvement necessary to continue to be successful in an ever-changing marketplace. That's the piece that needs to be agile. So yeah, the job roles are fairly stable. We know that your parts manager has to do this, your sales manager has to do this, your sales reps need to do these things. But how they accomplish those tasks, those outcomes, how they deliver those outcomes on a daily basis is likely evolving and has evolved over the past couple of years. So you have to think about it that way. It's about improving performance and finding ways to coach and help those managers, those employees, shift their performance in ways that are going to continue to keep them successful. That's the trick to agility.
All right, so we are up on time. For those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, I put a link to the certificate in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll also send out a follow-up email that'll include a link to the completion certificate as well as the webinar recording and the slides. You should expect that email in your inbox around 4 p.m. Central Time today. We hold these webinars every week. They're pre-approved for HRCI credit, so hope you'll consider joining us again next week's webinar is on Tuesday, not Thursday, October 21st, Coaching Skills for Your Managers and Leaders, and then we have one on Thursday on the 3 Bs of a content development strategy, and then following that, how to create a competency-based training program. So all the upcoming webinars on our website at bizlibrary.com/webinars. So again, thank you so much for all the great questions today. Thank you for attending with us, and thank you, Chris, for presenting.
And Jessica, thanks for being a great host, and everybody, thanks so much for attending. We really appreciate it. Hope to see you on a webinar soon.